for me. And we've done this once before, but we're going to do an interview today. We did an interview about 6 months ago, I think, with Juan. And we're going to interview today. I'll wait to say who it is just to let you get excited about it. It's going to be myself. I'm going to interview myself. It's basically going to be a sermon. It's going to be really awesome. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 10. It says, "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder. Someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames." You know, if you read this without the context of the previous, at least you know he's talking about if you build well, things last. If you build poorly, they fall apart. And we see this in building construction. We see this in Lego building. We see this in Jenga. We see this in relationships. And we see this in your connection to God.
Yeah.
The stronger the foundation, the longer it will last. And the stronger it will be. But right above this, Paul is addressing a problem in the church of division. And so some people are like, well, I like this guy. And they're like, well, I like this guy. And he's addressing this. And he says in verse 5, "What after all is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe. As the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed. Apollos watered it. But God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow." You know, I love this passage because I believe it's a passage about evangelism, but it's also a passage about the continuation of spiritual maturity in someone's life.
Yeah.
Becoming a disciple, making the decision to study the Bible, to be baptized, to commit your life to Jesus, is the first step. And I've been thinking a lot about just this idea of what's the percentage of people that when they become disciples, they remain faithful for life. Now, if you've been around for more than a couple of years, you would know that it's smaller than you want it to be.
Yeah.
And one of the jobs of the church is to help grow people, right? It's to help mature people so that they remain firm for years and years and then even into generations. And I think it's really important to remember that the work of evangelism, which with the church's way of saying how we reach out to people, how we help people become disciples, it doesn't stop when they get into the waters of baptism, right? Or when they choose to be Christians. That's actually when it starts. There's so much more that happens.
Yeah.
And I think it's what I wanted to point this out in this verse was that our role in reaching out to people and loving people into the faith is actually quite small. And you'll notice that Paul's like, I planted a seed. Apollos, who was another teacher who came later, he taught them, he watered it, but how does it grow? Well, only God makes it grow.
Yeah.
And what I want to do today is in a second, I'm going to have Jeff Schryver come up and I'm going to interview him.
Yeah.
Some of you don't know Jeff, which is the point. You're going to know him really well. Even if he still doesn't know your name, you will know his. And then you can be like, do you know my name? And make him feel uncomfortable. Like sometimes you make me feel. And like we make people feel that we think should know us, but I know all you. The reason I want to bring Jeff up is because Jeff and Sophia became disciples about 5 months ago, I think. And I really think the way they talk about their life has been especially encouraging to me. Because when you've been in it for a while, and you've been trying to follow Jesus for a while, sometimes you forget how beautiful it is to come out of your old life and into a new life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not everyone's story is, well, no one's story is the same.
Yeah.
And people come up here, like just the other day, like Kate spoke and Tyler, and they did a great job. But it's really hard to come up here and speak for 7 minutes and try to present something and kind of dish it to the group. And so sometimes it's nice to sit down and just to hear a story with questions asked. Because questions are kind of the way down deep, right? Like we dig deeper. And the reason I read this passage before bringing Jeff up is because I just want to remind you that God is always working in the people around you, and all you have to do is your part.
Yep.
It's just open your mouth.
Great point.
Just plant the seed. Just
Yeah.
bring up bring people into your home. Like, be hospitable, be loving. God is doing things in people's lives that you can't do to change a part of them that you can't change.
Yeah.
The heart, right? Which is what needs to happen for people to come to Jesus. So I'm going to bring up Jeff now and give him a round of applause. All right, so obviously you're not watching this on YouTube. This is a live production, which means you can interact with us if you want. I don't know what that means. Just feel like I need to say it. I did give Jeff the questions before, but like the reason I chose Jeff is because I knew he was someone that I could go off script with. And he said to me verbatim, "Go off script, bro," this morning. So I'm going to trash these questions now.
That's fine.
And so obviously, like, I'm talking to Jeff, he's talking to me, but we're also talking to you. So I don't know where we're going to look. Well, we're going to find out together. We're going to kind of let it go where it goes. Sound good?
Yeah.
You ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Consider this interview beginning right now.
Very dramatic.
Well, Jeff, thanks for coming to church today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And for basically doing the sermon. So I didn't have to prep it.
Sure,
So can you just tell us a little bit about your family to start, and where you live and what you do. Give us a little bit of that background, and then we'll jump into the questions.
My current family? Or my upbringing family?
Have you had another one?
Yeah.
We didn't talk about that.
Yeah. My parents are
Your current immediate family that lives in the house with you.
Yeah.
I was like, how many?
It is a legitimate question. First
Yeah, well, I got my beautiful wife, Sophia. I got 2 kids.
Give us a wave, Sophia.
Sophia, girl.
4 and 2, I'm sure you guys have seen them running around. They are unfortunately sick today, as is the usual these days. Yeah, but I mean, that's pretty
What
much
do you
what we
do?
got going on. I am a food service manager at one of the dining halls at U of M, Moshe Jordan.
Yeah.
Some of the students might know. Yeah, I know you guys, most of you go to Eastern, right? But
So we did our spring fling the other night, and Jeff came in, and he looked around. And part of Jeff's job is to basically manage people doing food service, and he's like the king. And so he looked around, and I think he saw the chaos, and he's like, "Hey, bro, maybe next year I can do this." And he meant it in total, like, I just want to serve. But I want you to know, whenever you ask me, if you ever say, like, "Hey, can I help you with something?" I will always say yes. Even if I don't have something immediately available, I'm like, just give me 5 minutes. I'll find something for you to do. And so Jeff's going to be running everything moving forward with the church.
sure, yeah.
Like all good stories, it's important to start with childhood, right? Like, so much of who we are is because of who we were. And the people that shaped us. And so Jeff, I just want to give you a chance to share a little bit about your childhood. Maybe perhaps tell us in general about your childhood, where you grew up, what life was like, and what was your home atmosphere like?
Yeah, so I grew up in Saline, so not far from here, out in the country a little bit. I had a brother and a sister, older brother, younger sister. My family was always like kind of in and out of church. They never really found like a church that they would just consistently go to for years. It was kind of like a couple weeks here, maybe a year here, you know. So that was kind of, weird at times, but Christianity was always there from day one. Particularly my grandparents, they had like really strong faith. And around age 9, I ended up getting Lyme disease. And that didn't, I'm just gonna give you the really fast version, that didn't go away until I was like 23. So, and I was like in and out of the hospital, like I had like PICC lines, IVs for years at a time, like they blasted me with so many antibiotics that like my gallbladder had to get torn out because I destroyed it. It was just like a whole, it was like definitely it was a lot, and as a kid, I think it's hard to understand that, I think, for anyone, but definitely like as a kid, I was kind of like, what's going on, my friends are, going swimming and stuff. I can't even take a shower without wrapping my arm up, And my brother, he was only 2 years older than me, so, before I got sick, we were just like, really tight and always hanging out all the time. But then when I got sick, he was always leaving the house to go hang out with his friends, and I couldn't join him. And, so like that was kind of the sad part, right? But I think...
Hit the pause button.
Yeah.
I feel like you can't skip over the 12 years of Lyme disease, right?
Yeah, sure.
I don't want the short Tell me a little bit about how did it happen?
Okay.
And give us some of the symptoms. Like, what were you going through in that period? That's a long period of time.
Yeah.
Like, were you always in the hospital? Were you in and out of school, like what was your, physically, how did it affect you? Start with that stuff.
Okay, sure. So it's like, it was really all over the place, to be honest. I mean, so I got bit by a tick when I was in Tennessee on vacation. We were up in the mountains riding horses, all that good stuff. And you know, we had been told by the locals to check for ticks and all that, so we did every night, but I guess we missed one, you know. So 2 weeks later, I'm at home, and I bumped my head on the wall, just like coincidentally, like going to lay down to go to sleep, and I was like, oh man, that hurt. Like I fell for a bump, you know. And I just felt like something like peeling off my head. I was like, I don't think I hit my head that hard, you know.
You're peeling your head off.
Yeah, I was like, so I started kind of flipping out, you know, and I went into my parents, and they took a look at it, and this tick was just like massive, dude. It's been like feeding on me for 2 weeks. Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
So I'm in, you know, yeah, it's gross. It's gross. So that's like 99, right? So we're in Michigan, like Lyme disease was not a thing to the doctors here at all. Like it was like, you know, you had to find like conspiracy theorist doctors to even,
Oh my gosh.
you know, like it was like that.
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
my favorite kind actually.
Yeah. So it was a struggle to even find a doctor that would acknowledge that it's possible that I could have Lyme disease from that type of tick, because apparently only one tick would contract. At least that's what they thought, that you could only get it from one type. And so they were just like, oh yeah, just look out for flu-like symptoms and call us. So they didn't do anything at all. So like fast forward, like, man, it's gotta be like a month, right? I'm in 3rd grade at the time. My teacher, so I was always like a really good student, and I started like acting out in class and you know, talking when the teacher was talking, and all kinds of stuff that I never did before that. And like we were learning our times tables at the time, and I remember like they had like a board. This is funny because they would never do this nowadays, but they had like a leaderboard.
Oh yeah, bring it back.
Yeah, and I was like crushing
Who's the
it.
best
I was like top 3.
Right.
I was like top 3 on the times table.
Oh yeah, I love it.
And then I just, the next time we went to do the times tables, like I didn't know any of them. Like I literally didn't know them at all. I was like lost. And then like I started like turning my paper the wrong way. Like, you know, the line is on this side, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't even figure out how to put my paper to like write.
Wow.
So my 3rd grade teacher called my mom, and she was like, something's not right. Like, I'm not calling to get him in trouble. I'm calling because I'm concerned, you know, like he's not acting right. And so they took me to the doctor. The doctor was like, well, those aren't flu-like symptoms. And so it was still kind of like a headache, but eventually I think my parents convinced them to put me on some kind of antibiotics, you know, but it was like, you know, a week of some,
too late.
yeah, some weak antibiotic that did nothing. So it just kept building and building and building, and it was just like, you know, come to find out later after I learned about Lyme disease is like the bacteria is kind of like spiral shaped. So it will like dig through your tissue, and it can like break your blood-brain barrier and get all the way in there and just cause all kinds of messed up symptoms. So I don't know if it's because of the physical location of where I was bit or what, but I ended up experiencing neurological symptoms first. So that made it harder to diagnose, especially in the area where they were like, what's Lyme disease, you know? So that's kind of like why it got so bad. And as far as like the symptoms after that, I mean, that was, to be honest, like that was just the start. It got really nasty. I mean, I ended up getting like full blown. I mean, all right, so the way they diagnosed me is like they diagnosed everything separately, because like I said, they didn't acknowledge Lyme disease. So like I would go to all these different doctors, if you like a neurological doctor for this issue, and
Right.
you know, a joint doctor for arthritis and this and blah blah blah. So I ended up having like 20 different disorders, and really they're all just the one, you know. But they diagnosed me with like Tourette's, OCD. These are all like the neurological ones, you know. Like I was just like full blown, like it was, you know, really bad. Like I couldn't, you know, I'm a kid. Like I didn't want to go in public, and I was like screaming involuntarily, you know. I mean, so like, you know, so that kind of like, you know, took church out of the situation. Like I'm not going to church, just
Right,
like
yeah.
sit in the pew and like scream, you know. And everyone's like, what's wrong with this kid?
So, yeah, so.
Took school out of the situation,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
because I didn't even know what was going on, and I honestly didn't even feel well enough to go to school. I think other than those kinds of symptoms, I had like really terrible stomach problems, like insane nausea. I mean, I slept most nights like on the bathroom floor just because I would throw up so often. A lot of terrible stuff like that, and then you know I did have like some more physical, like joint pain, and like I said, they did diagnose me with arthritis in my knees, and like I did have like other stuff later on. As far as like the hospital goes, it would basically be like when whatever symptom it was bad enough that I had to be hospitalized, they would just take me and they would be like, oh, he's fine now, and then they would send me home. Because like I said, Lyme disease wasn't really acknowledged, so it was more like, oh, that's weird, he can't move his neck, I wonder what that's about. Go talk to your doctor afterwards, you know, and then they would send me home.
Ouch.
Yeah, there was a period of time, I would say like it was less than 6 months, I couldn't walk. Don't know why, I can't explain it. My dad just carried me around everywhere because they thought it wasn't worth the wheelchair because it was probably temporary, which was correct, you know.
So you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 during all this kind of.
Yeah, I would call that 9, I would call all that like 9 to 15, you know, to be safe.
That's a lot for a 9 to 15-year-old.
Yeah.
So when that's all going on, obviously your family, your parents were sticking in there with you. You and your brother were close, but that relationship was harder because, you know, when you're 10, 11, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
How did all that shape your view of God? You know, as we talk about the spiritual journey, like what did that do to you, like to that childlike faith that you had, kind of that basic belief in God?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like it started strong, like I was fine with it, and you know, I was just like, oh, this is part of my journey, you know, whatever, and then it definitely like tanked like pretty quickly. I would say like the more different churches they took me to, and the more like different pastors like prayed over me, I would say the worse it got. Like for me, you know, personally,
Like your parents were taking you to these ministers to help like kind of heal you?
yeah, like there was this one guy who came from like South Africa and he was praying over people trying to heal them, and they took me there, and they took me here, and they took me there, and I think that was just really discouraging in the end.
Yeah.
Because like I'm just a kid, you know, so I'm just like, all right, well this one will work for sure, you know, and you know, I wake up the next day throwing up, so it's like, okay, you know, and I didn't have the sight then to see like that, you know, the whole picture, but so yeah, that was definitely not good for my faith, and my parents, amazing parents, like I'm so grateful for them, but I would say that their faith maybe wasn't strong enough to also kind of like uphold my faith, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand.
And I think the more sick I got, the worse all of our faiths got, because, you know, like they stopped taking me to church. They stopped going to church. They're staying home to take care of their kid. Medical bills stacked real fast. They're stressed out. My dad's working all these crazy hours, you know. So it was kind of like compounding, you know, like it got worse because our lives got worse, because I think the strong foundation, like we were just talking about, wasn't there, you know, for them. And I think that kind of snowballed into how I looked at faith as well.
So at what point would you say that your faith was not really present anymore? Or what was the lowest point?
The lowest point I would say is probably between like, I would say like between like ages, maybe like 18 and then actually like when I started doing studies, honestly, like, cause what happened is like there became a point where I just stopped like looking at it at all. There was never a point where I stopped believing in God fully, but there was a strong point where I was just like, is it worth my effort? Does that make sense? Like, there's such a small, in my head, there was such a small chance that it was real that I was just like, it's not worth it. Like, I've been doing this my whole life. Like, I'm just gonna try to be the best person I can be and just try to, you know, raise my kids right. And
You had enough moral, like, you were given like a foundation of like moral goodness, enough so that whether God was real or not, you wanted to live a good life.
yeah.
But was your struggle with God simply because how could God be good and care about me with all the suffering I've gone through? Like, would you say it's that, or is it
No,
something different than that?
Honestly, I think this is sad to say looking back now, like as I'm reflecting on it, but I would say I probably never just put enough thought into it at all. Cause like I definitely never felt like I had it the worst, you know, cause like I was always pretty like aware of what was going on in the world. And I think, you know, being sick actually like made me mature so fast, you know, and I remember when I went to get my gallbladder taken out, there was a kid in the room with me. We were sharing a room, and he had cancer, and he was around the same age as me, and he was really sick. And like the next morning I woke up, he wasn't there, you know, because he died. And like that was like a defining moment for me where I was like, this is nothing, you know what I mean?
How old were you?
Well, I was 13 when I had my gallbladder out.
Wow.
So I think it was never like, oh, how could God let me suffer like this? It was more like, just draining. I think like the energy of it, I eventually just stopped putting energy into it at all. Like I stopped thinking about it, you know, it wasn't
You were getting no
a decision.
return.
Yeah, it wasn't a decision that was made. It was more like, I'm just gonna move on with my life, you know.
Yeah.
Whether he's real or not. Like I got into the habit of, you know, I've heard a lot of people say this now actually, like this is a pretty common belief nowadays that people say, well, like, if God is real and I live a great life, I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, whatever, I'll just be the best person I could be, and I hope that works out for me. You know, so that I was stuck in that until I started studying the Bible here.
I think I think a lot of people would have taken what happened to you and really rebelled against God, honestly.
for sure.
It's pretty amazing to me that you.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you developed this like hatred of God.
Mhm.
It was more like a general apathy about the pursuit of God.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
just feeling like, man, I don't know, my energy. I'm using enough of my energy just trying to kind of like not throw up. You know what I mean? Like just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
survive. Like and because you have been around. That's the thing about hospitals, right? Like Chris and I spent a lot of time in children's hospitals the last year and a half. And you go in there and you think your situation's bad, and it is. Like most of us would look at your situation and be like, that's bad. Like as bad as it gets. But then when you go in, there's always someone that has it worse.
Yeah.
It just always seems that way. And so you, even at that age, you were able to compute that, but your faith wasn't strong. And so it's interesting, you moved into this place that I think so many people in our society move into, which is, I don't really have the energy or the desire to pursue a deeper relationship with Jesus.
Mhm.
I know it will require a lot of me. I'm not sure I want to do that. But I'll just be a good person. I'm just going to assume that's going to be enough.
Yep.
Like that is, I feel like that is like at the foundation of so many people's relationship with God. It's not actually a relationship. It's kind of this feeling of, we get our place to this place of comfort, and then we can kind of live the life we want as long as we're good to our standard, and we convince ourselves that we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And so you said from about 18 to, in the last year or so, that was your situation. Can you give me, like, in that time period, what were the big events that happened in your life, and what was your life like? That, 12-year period or whatever. Because how old are you now?
33.
33. You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I had to think about it.
After I got over 19, I was like, I just need
Yeah,
to
wait. Yeah, 33.
Okay. Sophia, is that confirmed? Is he 33?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So from that 18 to 33 slot,
Yeah.
just give us kind of like the cliff notes of life. Like, what was life like? How did you live your life? Perhaps how did you and Sophia meet? Like, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I got healthy around like 23-ish, and
And you just got healthy.
yeah, I still don't have a solid answer for it. I was still on like IV antibiotics like up to the end. Like they were only like, I don't know if it was a law or if it was insurance or what, but like they could only give me IV antibiotics for like a year at a time, like the peak time. So they would like yank it out, start a new one, yank it out, start a new one. Like try to find a vein that could
The
still
verbs
take
you
it.
used to
I'm
describe your
sorry.
body, yank it out. I think you said they tore my gallbladder out. I have this image in my head that's not what happened. But I'm with you. That's how it felt.
They tore it
Yeah,
out.
no,
It was trash. They're like, no good, you gotta take it out. Yeah,
So 23 symptoms kind of fade.
Yeah.
No real explanation for it.
so well, the only explanation I could have is that was also like I would say like those 3 years, like 2023, whatever. We started seeing like this holistic doctor, and they were just like, eat kale, drink smoothies, and I was like, all right. So like,
They just threw it at you like that?
yes,
Sidearm?
So my dad would literally wake up every day for work, get ready, make a fresh green smoothie for me, bring it into me like I'm sleeping, with like, here, chug this, and I'll drink it, go back
That's
to
a
sleep.
tough way to wake up.
Yeah, no, but you know what? He found a good recipe. He
All
found a good
Okay,
recipe. I'll make it for you. I'll make it for you. You'll like it.
Send it to me. Send it to everyone.
Right.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Kristen will be
Banana's the secret. It's
Those are the
Banana is the secret
Yeah.
to all.
it takes the terribleness away.
You're right.
Yeah. So anyway, so I was really just like, really all my teenage years and like 18, 20, 23, all that, I was really just playing video games all day. Like that's pretty much all I did. I mean, I didn't go to school. I was homeschooled. By that I mean like I never even graduated. And it was just like, I'll stay home and try to, but then like it was too much, and like I had a lot of difficulties even learning too. Like there was all kinds of other stuff that I didn't really mention. It was just kind of like, I couldn't focus at all.
Yeah.
It's really bad ADHD and all this other stuff, but.
So there's a lot of video games, and then
Games, and then.
that makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
that was a perfect escape for you.
Yep, and then I was never using my muscles or anything ever, right? Because I'm just playing video games all
Except
day.
your fingers were just shredded.
Yeah, So, so I decided to get a job, and as a dishwasher at a local restaurant out in Saline.
And you're how old here?
That was 23.
Okay.
Yeah. So the
Kind of the
first.
beginning of the next chapter of your life.
Yeah. So like the first 2 weeks were like the worst pain ever, and like that's someone who's lived a life of pain. It was just like my body's like, dude, what are you doing? You're insane. Stop. But then like it just kind of like I broke out of that. I think it was just like my muscles getting used to being used again.
Yeah.
And then like it just kind of I was just fine after that. You know, my mom was just like, you just working a full-time job now? I'm like, I don't know, I guess. You know, it was literally like that. Like that's just how. And they're like, well, how's your stomach? I'm like, it's alright. You know, like it was just kind of like that. I don't know. There's no real full explanation. It's not like this is the thing that fixed me, but.
Yeah.
So I was working that job, and then I started cooking at the same restaurant because it looked really fun. Like every time I saw the cooks, I was like, dude, I gotta get in there. It's just like.
It's funny, because every time I watch a show or just watch people cooking, I get stressed out. I cooked breakfast just for me, my son, and my wife today, and there was a moment where I was like, it's a lot. Like, I gotta time it all out, you know what I mean? Like, can't finish the bacon too early.
Yeah,
like, you can't go.
it's I don't know what it is because I really hate like I'm not an adrenaline junkie. Like I hate roller coasters and all that stuff, but something about the kitchen, like I thrive in that chaos. I don't know if it's like the ADHD, like me being kind of scatterbrained. It's easy to focus on everything all at once.
Right.
Yeah, it's like all of the sensory that you could ever possibly need.
That's it.
So I gravitated to that, and then I just loved it, and I just learned like all the stations. And then she came in around, I think around the time I switched to cooking, she came in as a server.
With like an angelic like light around you.
More or less, I mean that's how I remember it at least. So that's where we met, and we were just talking for a long time, and we were just coworkers and friends, and then it progressed, and then we ended up getting married. And
How old were you? Staying on the chronology.
I don't know. How old? 26?
I didn't think you were gonna settle with, I don't know, you gave up there.
26? I'm bad. I know we got married in 2017.
Yeah,
That's
fair enough.
that's close enough, right?
Alright, so then like in the late 20s. And at that stage, where were you at with God? Like kind of that same place?
Yeah, it was
you
just
hadn't really thought
kinda-
about it a lot, and church wasn't really a part of your life.
No, not at all.
Were you praying at all?
No.
Bible?
No.
And when you got healthy, how did your lifestyle change other than work, like, or your mental state? Like, did you go do a bunch of stuff that you couldn't do before, or are you still like?
No, I was really tanked still after I got out of work. I was exhausted. I would just go back to playing video games.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
Yeah.
That was the escape, right?
Yeah.
So, I feel like we understand you a lot better now.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. People are listening, which I think they are. So, I can understand what happened in your childhood, even though I can't really understand it. Like, I can connect to, like, intellectually, how that shaped you. You get to this part of your life, you meet Sophia, you guys get married, you have a couple kids, great girls, and then tell me about, like, I mean, I know, obviously, because I was 5 doors down at the time. Jeff and I are neighbors. We're like 5 doors down around the block. So I do know the answers to a lot of these questions. I just want you to know. Does Kyle know this? Yeah, he does. But I just learned some new things legitimately that I didn't know before. Tell me then, maybe tell the group, how did you get connected to the church? Like, what happened that made that happen? And why did you, like, why say yes at that point in your life? Because after that point, like, life had gotten a lot better. Like, you were operating fine, right? And I think we feel that about a lot of our coworkers and our friends. Like, occasionally you'll meet someone who's just like rock bottom. But sometimes we meet people, we invite them to church or whatever, and it's just kind of like their life's fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't really, I guess I could want God. But then you study the Bible, then you're like, and you're ready to be a disciple? And they're like, I feel good. You know, I feel pretty okay right now, like with where I'm at. So in that place in life, what was happening in your life that made you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably give credit to Sophia on this because she was raised in the church as well, kind of. But I think it was a little more strict. Like you just go every Sunday, automatic, And when we had kids, we like briefly mentioned like here and there, like we should probably take them to church, right? Like it's weird to like raise them, cause like that's the thing. Like I didn't have to think about it before, but like when you have kids, you have to think about it because like you're gonna get all those questions. You know what I'm saying? So like by me like not taking my kids to church, does that mean God's not real? Like do I have to tell them that one day, or you know what I'm saying? Because they're gonna wonder like why don't we go to church? Like this person goes to church or whatever.
Yeah.
So like I had to figure it out so then I could raise them, you know, what in the way that I believed in or we believed in. So she was like, yeah, let's take them to church, you know, and it just seemed like a great idea. And then I think that was just kind of like a thought or a conversation, you know. But then I think she ran into you guys in the neighborhood, right?
It was Kristen.
Kristen, and then she invited us somewhere.
Probably to our house.
Probably, yeah.
Way
Or
be
to
specific
church.
about
I don't
it.
know which came first, church.
Kristen, what? Give us that part of the story briefly.
I don't know if I remember either.
Oh,
It's okay. It really doesn't matter.
remember
Should have prepped you guys.
Sophia said, "Oh, I'm coming to your church now."
No.
And I was like, "Okay, great."
I'm going to join your
Yes,
Join your church.
Yes. I'm
She
so
said,
here for you.
okay, we'll see.
That sounds like, that sounds
Yeah.
like Sophia.
So Sophia comes back and she's like, we're going to church.
And I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So we will. But you said yes to that because you had already kind of been prompted by that dad instinct. Like you, it seems like what God was doing in the background was that, okay, you yourself weren't motivated for yourself to do this. Like it was more because you loved your girls. And you felt like, how am I going to answer them? How am I going to raise them? I believe in God, but he's not really a really authentic part of my life at this point.
Yeah.
So when church came to the equation, it was an obvious yes for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was especially it was literally at the perfect time in my life for me to like 100% say yes to going to church because I was managing 3 food trucks and working 80 hours a week, and me and Sophia's relationship wasn't as great as it had been before that, and neither was my kids. You know, like they would like cry when I would leave the house, and then that was like it would just ruin my whole day. You know, and I knew something had to change, so I was actively changing jobs. I think around the same time I started doing Bible
When we
studies.
met you were still working that crazy job.
You're right, I was.
Because I didn't know what you looked like or who you were.
Yeah, right.
I remember Kristen was like, yeah, Sophia's got a husband, but he works 80 hours a week. And I was like, hey, what? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah. And that was the other thing too. Like I was slowly becoming the husband in the neighborhood that nobody knew of. You know, like she was her husband just never around, and like that. Everything felt bad. You know about where I was at in my life. And so like when she's like, let's go to church, I'm like, you know, I think something deep down was like, a lot of this, to be clear, a lot of this was just like subconscious. I just like felt the pull, and I just, you know, I just went. Like I didn't really ever sit and think about it. I just was like, she's like, let's go to church. I'm like, all right, let's go. And then I went. Yeah.
And so, but you quit your job on your own, like before any Bible study, before anything, because you felt like my family deserves better. Right?
Yeah. It was definitely clear to me like that job was gonna lead to like a terrible outcome. And I had seen so many chefs get divorced and like lose their families. Like and pretty much all of my mentors were like old, single, their kids hate them. Like, you know, they're amazing at their jobs. Like they taught me everything I know, and their family life is terrible. And so
But
like
to
I didn't
become
want
amazing
that.
in their job, they had to sacrifice something more important.
Yeah, but the saddest part about it is I think they didn't make the conscious decision ever. I think they always just went with the flow until one day it was too late, and then they regretted what it's too late.
It's an interesting lesson in like learning from other people's lifetime failure. Like not to be overly harsh to those people,
it's
but
true,
like you
though.
look at somebody's life that's in shambles, and you're like, ooh, how did you get there, and how do I not do that? In reversed, obviously the idea of imitation, like Jesus talks about it a lot, like, you know what I mean? Like, do as I do, like walk as Jesus did in 1 John 2. That idea of finding people that you want to be like and imitating their faith, like it's the reverse of what you're talking about, you know what I mean? But it takes wisdom to see both. It takes wisdom to see. Do you guys ever see the demotivator posters before?
Oh yeah.
I wish I had them up here. So there's these motivational posters that would be like, it's like a guy like a girl jumping over the high jump, and it's like sometimes Sometimes you'll reach heights you never thought you could reach if you try hard enough. You're like, yeah! And then someone decided to make demotivators. And it's like, I remember this one of a ship sinking in the ocean. And it said, sometimes the only point in your life is to prove to others you shouldn't, like, sail a boat. Or something like that. You know, it's just like, I butchered it really bad.
Yeah.
But it kind of reminds me of what you're
Yeah.
saying. Like,
Yeah.
you looked at those people and you're like, oh man, like, I don't want that life. So you quit that job
Mhm.
right at the time when you start coming to church. You start coming to church, we ask you to study the Bible, you're like, sure, and I can imagine why. You're like, yeah, why wouldn't I do that right now?
Basically.
When you're studying the Bible, what can you, and what kind of like, the landing gear is coming out, and the pilot's like, hey, we're coming in for a landing, so that's happening really soon. When you were studying the Bible, you know, we have people in here studying the Bible right now, or a lot of us have studied, or are about to start studying. What obstacles did you face, and what do you feel like if there was a turning point, what was it for you?
I would say really the only big obstacle I faced was kind of like I had like a few specific kind of questions. Like I was always like a really inquisitive kid, and so like growing up, I had every pastor that I met, I would just be like, so do you know the answer to this? And they would be like, you're just a kid, leave me alone. You know, because it was like really I mean, I would literally like hit them with some really hard questions. And I think I never got an answer
Like
that
Jesus
said-
in the temple, man.
I mean, I don't even remember the question specifically, but it was just like a lot of stuff that didn't make sense to me at the time. And so, you know, when we started doing the studies, I think I've always been like a all in or all out kind of person. You know, I'm not gonna just do anything halfway. So I remember I borrowed a book from you. I forgot the name of the book.
Did you give it back to me?
Yeah,
Just
literally the next day.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
So I like crammed that book like the entire day.
It was a basic book on apologetics, which is like the evidences for faith. It was just called Reasons for Belief, and it was a bunch of Q&As.
Yeah.
People asking this guy questions and him answering them. You know.
So like because like I had said before, I kind of never thought about it, right? Because I just kind of ignored it. So this was basically the time in my life where I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna do Bible studies, if I'm gonna eventually get baptized, like I need to like commit like fully. So, you know, the way I looked at it was like from a point of view of logic, like in order for me to like follow Jesus properly, that means I have to like follow and obey the Bible fully, like word for word. And in order for me to do that, then I have to trust the Bible.
Yeah.
In order for me to trust the Bible, I had to have some
Yeah,
questions answered. So then I got those questions answered with that book, and then I was just all in after that.
One thing I appreciated about you, God had done so much work in the background already, right? And He had already shaped your character. You know, a lot of people have those questions about God. They're very good questions. What I appreciated about you is what I find with people continually is that, I mean, I've had this conversation like 3 times this week with people, that faith, I believe faith really is a choice that we make.
Yeah.
I think we have to examine, and I think God has to move in our hearts, but there is a spirit of humility about you that I remember very well, and that pervades in your life now, that I think that it's hard for us to believe. We should check why that is. Like, do we want to believe, right? Like, the evidence is right there, in my opinion. And it can be presented, it doesn't need to be presented to us. You know what I mean? Like, if you're just like, oh, is the Bible true? I'm like, yeah, it is. Why are you asking me? Come on, dumb question, bro. Move on. You know what I mean? Like, I can't just assume that that's going to magically happen. I think if you have a logical question, if I believe this is truth, I should have a logical answer. But that logical answer should work, right? It doesn't mean there aren't deeper questions, but I think that your choice to believe, I really was a faithful choice. And I just think that's a part of when people study the Bible, that sometimes we can forget. Like, to believe is a choice to a certain degree. And so you make that choice, and by that point, you're like, God, you already knew you were in. Because you're like, this is what needs to happen. You knew you hadn't lived that way. Now, kind of closing question here. Since you've become a disciple, it's been 5 months, so it's not like you got 50 years behind you. But I know we've had so many conversations, and you've made so many comments about how different your life feels now. You were a really good guy before, and you had a good life before.
Yeah.
And you were you were a man of integrity. You were making good dad decisions and husband decisions. Were you great at all those things? No, I think you would have said that you weren't then. But even the decision to quit your job was a great move. But now, even though you had a good life, the way you talk about your life now, you'll say things like, I can't even imagine not being a disciple. Or how did I ever not see this before? Or these are things that you've said to me.
Yeah.
I love, like, there have been times when you've had to miss church because your girls are sick or whatever, and you're just in agony you can't come to church.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, compared to some other people maybe who are out here, perhaps, who feel like going to church is hard.
Yeah.
And I can feel that because perhaps I'm a little entitled because I've had it so long.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about how you feel about your life now since it's changed and why you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. There's the first thing I think is just like the different ways in which my life has improved, which I will get to in a second. But I think that the other thing is kind of like looking back at my life now, right? Like a lot of the reason why I struggled with my faith before, with why am I sick and this and blah blah blah. At least that's what I was saying back then. It all makes sense to me now. Like it all makes 100% sense. Like the reason I'm humble is because I was so sick. Like that'll humble you so fast, And the reason like why I can learn from other people's mistakes or why I have or I had good morals like before I started studying the Bible was because I spent so much time with my dad, who was a really good moral man, and I learned from people's mistakes because I had to watch everybody's life from home. You know what I mean? Like I literally watched everybody live their lives, and I just talked to my mom all day, and I would tag along with her when she went to her bowling once a week, and whatever.
She a good bowler?
She was. I don't think she bowls in a while. I don't remember.
Come on, bro. 160.
All I know is that let me bowl for free.
Right.
So
Get that
I was
information.
good.
Get that information.
I was good. Yeah. So it all makes sense to me now. Like kind of like my whole life before this was kind of like setting me up for where I'm at now. And now it's super clear that was always supposed to be like that. And I think that's a big part of it. And then the other big part is kind of like it's kind of hard to explain, but I just have like this peace I didn't have before.
Awesome.
Like big time. I just know that everything's gonna be fine 100% no matter what, as long as I just give it my all and stay with God. And then confidence too. I always had like this. I would never would have done this before, 100%. Not just because it's church, but just because I hate speaking in front of
You're
people.
crushing it though.
Yeah, but that's just like a new thing for me.
Yeah.
That's 100% a new thing, and like I just took the biggest job I ever had. Like managing a dining hall. We serve like 5,000 students a day. It's like terrifying, or it was terrifying.
Yeah.
But now it's not. It doesn't even scare me, and like I'm giving speeches to like parents of students who are coming in to like they might want to take their kids there, and I'm like giving speeches to like 50 people at a time with like all my bosses
Just always getting
staring
standing
at me.
ovations just every time.
No, I never would have done that. I mean, I literally hated my bedroom and just played World of Warcraft for like 15 years straight. Like that's it. So I just like fundamentally feel different, and I also feel like all of my priorities are really clear to me now. Like it's obvious that it's God first, and then family, and like I can raise my family right by showing them, how to follow God and how to be with God, and it's super clear to me now. And everything else after that just falls in place. You don't even have to think, and I think that's part of why I have so much peace is because like I realized you don't even have to think about anything else. All you have to do is put God first, and then everything else just follows suit.
Come on,
And
Jack.
so I think that is the biggest difference in my life now. Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome.
That was awesome, bro. I kind of wanted to clap. We'll clap for you in a second, but I don't want to force the group to clap. That can be hard to be manipulated into clapping. I want to close out with this verse here that I think I thought about when you were talking about your life. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything."
Amen.
I just think about, I so appreciate the way you processed your pain. And your humility to me has always really stood out. You're easy to be friends with.
Yeah.
And you have been a joy to me. I really I think your character is so high. And it's interesting. The reason I shared what I shared at the beginning is because when we studied the Bible with Jeff, it was super easy. And what I mean by that is that there were very few obstacles, which was surprising, is because you had lived a lot of life already. and you have processed that life with so much maturity that you could already see like, oh, this was God. Like you weren't embittered to God because of what he did. Instead, you were able, there's a certain level of maturity it takes to look past your pain to see the purpose of it.
Yes.
And you suffered well. Not everybody's able to do that.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, pain represents a wall that they hit and then they drop down.
Yes.
And they move further from God. It's very polarizing. For you, you actually, you can only go up or down when you see pain, and you went up.
Mhm.
And I just really respect that. And so I think for anybody out there that's particularly suffering, like, take a lesson from Jeff and Sophia, right? They went through so much, and have where you are now. And obviously you guys haven't arrived. None of us have arrived. But to hear you say what you said, for me, it's rejuvenating about my life with Jesus. I'm like, all right, like, it's not always going to be perfect. And the people I meet, the people that studied the Bible with Jeff, it's not like we did anything to convince you. We just planted the seed. And in fact, you could probably make the argument the seed was planted by somebody else. Perhaps we just watered it a little. And then God made it grow. And so, dude, great job. Thank you for sharing, and super inspiring.
Thanks.
So that's it. What we're going to do now is Zach's going to come on up, and about once every, 4 to 6 weeks or so. Yeah, sorry, you can go sit down. I didn't say anything. How confident is he really? He said he's so confident. I asked Zach to come up and just pray about once every 6 to 8 weeks or so, maybe a little less than that. I like to have a chance for us to just pray for what's happening in the world. In Romans 13, it talks about pray for like your government. And some of us are like, no, never. You know what I mean? It's like, but what's happening in the world is just in a hard spot. There are wars. I don't know if you remember, but not long ago we talked about there are well over 100 armed conflicts going on. And so I didn't ask Zach to pray for every single one because we're about out of time. But I did ask him just to come up and give a general prayer of faith for the people in those positions that can really make change, and that God would work in those people. And then we'll close with some announcements. Zach, come on up, do your thing.